Hello and welcome to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed and we are in the Meno. We are on a hunt to discover what is virtue and can it be taught? And one of the questions we have is, how does it relate to dialectic? Because dialectic is what Socrates is demonstrating for us. And we are on a hunt to figure out what it is. As a quick recap, we have seen a couple of dialectics already. We had the fun introduction where Meno opens with the question, can virtue be taught? Assuming he knows what virtue is. Socrates pulled him up on that and saying, hey, do you know what virtue is? Meno gave a description of, a common idea of virtue that a lot of people have nowadays, as true today as it was then. Virtue is, the excellence of what we can be as souls is being able to harm your enemies, punish the guys you don't like, the bad guys, and be good to your friends, and also get away from any sort of punishment yourself, right? Remain scot-free while doing those other two things. So that was his opening definition of what virtue is. By the way, Socrates was able to, before he even gave that definition, Socrates did point out he was able to recognize a kind of idea of what it means to be wise just by his mannerisms, what kind of family he's from, what his partner is probably going to be like, what teacher he had. All of these things influence our beliefs, our personal opinions about what truth is, about what it means to be wise, about what virtue is. What do you do with wisdom? These are all influenced by these things. The family, the culture, which then will decide what kind of teacher you'll gravitate towards, the sorts of people that will tell you the things that will inform the prejudices or pathologos. Beliefs you already carry, those are going to be the teachers you gravitate towards. Today we call them grifters or sophists, right? And then also the kind of societies that encourage this kind of way of being. Socrates talked about his city. And also, if this is your idea of what it means to be good and just, it's going to be the sort of person you're attracted to. Socrates saw all this, gave it all to us in the first page. Oh, this is your partner and your family and the society, and this is the idea of what it means to be wise. Now, the idea of virtue that we just outlined, harming your enemies and being good to your friends, was the first part of it. But Meno goes on to say, oh, by the way, it's different for a man and a woman, because a man manages a city, a woman can only manage a house. And there's a different virtue for slaves who don't manage anything, and children and old people and so on. So this was a first description, a very common one. It's kind of how we think, a lot of people think even today. And when pressed, they will have to say, yeah, well, I guess people do it. I mean, it's going to be different for women. I don't know how many children are going to be able to harm their enemies. Maybe it's a bit different for them. So Socrates calls this a swarm of bees. He gave me a swarm of bees, many different examples, and not an actual definition. So we have some questions. Why? If he's loved by his society and goes to this well-respected teacher and so on, why is he struggling to give a definition? Why can he only point to examples? And is there a definition or a principle as to why people do that. So not just Meno as an example, thumbs up, or your friend or yourself, but what is the principle that prevents people from actually being able to give a definition of something? Why is it that people tend to only point to physical examples in the physical world and say, I like that, I like that, I like that, and therefore that's what it means to be good? These things that I like. Is there a principle? So it's one of the questions we have. Okay. Socrates then himself gives a definition, and a definition of what virtue is. And that's very telling, because his first definition of virtue has the parts of the dialectic in it. So he structured his thinking well. He said, this is what it is, definition. This is how it's used, demonstration. This is how it applies to other things, so that we can build an argument. That's the division. And his conclusion has two parts. This is the conclusion we have from all of the examples that unifies them together. And the second half of conclusion is to bring it back to the top. Therefore, this supports the definition. This is thinking well and arguing well and teaching well. So we have it on the board here. Now, the structure of the dialectic has 4 parts. So if you want to think well, if you want to talk well, if you want to reason well, and by the way, can you be a just person? Can you have virtue? Can you have the excellence of a human being if you are thinking in a sloppy way? If you're just throwing out insults and personal attacks and personal opinions? I like this, so this is right, and I will go to war to support this opinion I have. Is that justice? Or is that kind of the opposite? Is that vice and the cause of tyranny and oppression? How many wars are fought by people simply not being able to think well, talk well, reason well, and instead blindly defend their own stupid opinions? How many wars? All of them? If all of them, or majority of them, then can we go from the many physical examples to a principle? Is there a principle that will allow us to understand all war, all conflict? Go from the swarm of bees, the many different wars and conflicts in human history, to a definition. What will that give us? Understanding. Understanding what? The cause and the conditions. That's what we're after. As philosophers, as people, as human beings, we want to understand everything. Your toaster is broken. Don't you want to understand why it's broken and how to fix it? What's the cause of the burnt toast? All right, so dialectic. Very, very simple. 2 parts. Di means two. A conversation between two things. The subject, for us right now, it's virtue. What is virtue? And then to talk about it, you have to rub it up against something. It has to be doing something. So you have self or subject and other. Now you can talk about what it is or what follows if it isn't. So another 2. And within each, you have 4 categories. Definition. What is the subject itself? Self to self. What can you say about it? How does it function towards that other? Demonstration. Now, that other, how does it divide up? These are where you have the arguments or the steps. And then finally, the conclusion, which has synthesis and analysis. You take these others, you unify it together, and then you take it back to the start. Simple. This is how we need to think. Always. Always, or only sometimes? Sometimes is it good to be a slave to our own ignorance and our personal opinions? Sometimes is it good to start wars because we can't understand the cause of things and instead we blame others? Sometimes is it good to have conflict and war because we can't reason together and come to a unified conclusion? Everyone, because understanding doesn't pick teams. It's not team black or white, team Protestant or Catholic. It's not anything like that. It's understanding itself, meaning it's universal, meaning everyone can play, meaning it is the thing that can unify your soul and unify humanity. Why? Because it's open to everyone, everyone can understand, everyone can play, and you confirm your own understanding in your experience. What does that mean? You can define it in your understanding and you demonstrate it. You actually prove it to yourself. You don't have to believe anyone. Try it. Define. This is our definition of the dialectic, but use it. Use it whenever you're thinking, whenever you're talking. Use this simple structure. You want to talk about a bike? Someone says, hey, what's a scooter? I've never seen a scooter before. Try it. Give a definition of the scooter itself. Then tell your friend how it works, how it functions, how it demonstrates. Then, by the way, after you have a scooter that you can ride, talk about the different ways you can use it. The implications, how you can use this scooter at the skate park to make friends, to get to the shop faster. Then finally, talk about, after doing that, how does that scooter relate back to you? How do you then relate back to the scooter itself? Because you would be the other. So the scooter, how does the scooter relate to you? How do you, with the scooter, then do all these things? And then finally, after doing all these things, how do you relate back to the scooter? Do you have to look after it? Do you have to chain it up at the store? Do you have to grease the wheels? Try it. What's that? That is a demonstration of the dialectic you are defining. Try it. Don't believe me. Don't believe other streamers. Don't believe YouTube celebrities. Try it for yourself. This is how come the dialectic is what unifies can unify humanity and unify your soul. You don't have to be in conflict with yourself. Humanity, forget about them. Well, not forget about them. It might take a longer time for humanity to get on board, but you can do it. Now, try it where? Try it in your relationships, talking with your loved ones. Try it in your art. Structure your art this way. Structure your songs. Structure your short stories this way. Try it over coffee with your friends, talking about scooters. So this is the division stage. Try it in all these different areas. Then what do you do? After doing that, after spending your day doing that in the division, at the end of the day, reflect on all of those divisions. That's synthesis. Reflect on it. What do you make of it? Because experiences are dead. It's the reflection and understanding we put on our experiences that allow us to develop and grow. What do you make of that? Come to a conclusion. Now, after reflecting on it at the end of the day, relate back to dialectic itself. Do you have a better definition now? After having done this, that's the analysis part. Notice, as you unfold, when you go back to the beginning definition, you have understood it in a new way. You have all these new experiences. You have this new conclusion. So it evolves you. You're constantly growing. So not only can it unify your soul and unify humanity, because it's the paradigm of understanding, and because it's understanding and not belief and opinion, it's universal and open to all and verifiable for yourself. So no need for believing other jokers. Not only does it unify in all those ways, but it allows for our evolution and growth, making it a structure for personal development or the spiritual task, the spiritual quest. This can, just as can unify all people, doesn't matter what color you are, what opinions you start with. If you grow up Protestant, you're going to be Protestant. Those are the opinions you have when you don't know any better. Now, we do philosophical midwifery to help uncover our unsuspected false opinions. We do that on the channel as well. Check out that series on YouTube. But not only does it unify all people, it must therefore unify all groups, including spiritual groups, be it Protestant, be it Buddhist, be it Taoist. Why? Because if this is the paradigm for understanding and evolution, that also can be applied to not just scooters or understanding war and conflict, but defining beauty. In the text we're reading, defining justice, which are things of the realm of being, the metaphysical or spiritual realm, the thing that you can only see through the eye of the soul, or separating the soul from the body. So it's the spiritual quest. Then not only is it the paradigm for understanding, solving problems, and unifying humanity, it is also the paradigm for unifying or synthesizing, that's the unification, all of the divisions of spirituality. So you can say, how do you define spirituality? The understanding and experience of the highest aspects of reality and self that are non-physical, eternal. So that's a definition of spirituality. How does it demonstrate itself? Well, you could say, well, there has to have some sort of yoga or some sort of experience demonstration of these higher dimensions. You need to go there yourself and check it out yourself. But of course, that's not enough, because many people have had a one-off experience or a trip. Hopefully you've done some understanding, definition, and practiced your understanding so that when you do have the experience, you can understand it, go into it well, and also when you come back into your body, integrate it into your way of being. So that's a demonstration of our definition of spirituality. Division. So again, we're doing dialectic. Division. What are the many different divisions or of that kind of thing we've just defined and demonstrated? Well, Buddhism, Taoism, meditation, sport. Some people try and develop through sport or displays of energy or art. You can add to that list. Therefore, from that list, is there something that unifies them? Or of that list, is there a example that is higher that incorporates all the others? That's synthesis. Dialectic. All of these other divisions take part in some way, in some manner of the dialectic, to various degrees of success. So an athlete probably doesn't do the dialectic much, has to kind of cross his fingers and hope to get into the zone. Now, someone doing Buddhism probably does some reading and has some Vedic scriptures he probably reads and has some conversations with people. So there's a little bit of dialectic happening, but it gets to a level and they say no more talking. Thinking and talking is a sickness of the mind. So there's their block. Philosophy, what we're doing, doesn't have that block. Or will have that block, but does philosophical midwifery to use the dialectic to understand and remove that block, because we recognize that the blocks are bad. You don't want a block to understanding, a block to communicating, a block to thinking well. Even if you are applying that understanding and communication to the highest aspects of self and reality. Hey, don't you want to even talk about that? Of course you do. But what if my teacher says, oh, don't ask questions about that? That's his block. So, what is the synthesis of all of these divisions of spiritual traditions? What is the highest aspect that incorporates and understands all of them? What's the conclusion we get from doing the division on spirituality? The logos, or the dialectic. The structure of the understandability of self and reality as the ultimate or true or complete spiritual tradition, of which all others are various levels of divisions of. Therefore, analysis. We take that conclusion and we go back to the start and say, hey, remember how we defined spirituality as the understanding, experience, and integration of the higher dimensions of self and reality, well, the ultimate nature of self and reality? Now we have a new definition. Having gone through this process, we have evolved our definition. We have improved. We have developed intellectually and spiritually. We have just gone through a spiritual evolution. Why? Because now our definition not only includes that, it also includes this conclusion we came to, the dialectic. So now we have a new definition of spirituality. What is it? Spirituality is the understanding and experience of the dimensions of the spirit, leading up to the highest aspects of mind and the nature of self itself, that happens through the dialectic and the logos. So now we have a better definition and understanding of spirituality. We have evolved. By the way, notice dialectic and logos isn't a team. It isn't a Buddhist. You don't have to wear the robes or the funny hats or do the chanting that Buddhists or Hare Krishnas or this or that group have to do. It's literally just a structure of understanding that's open to everyone. It can unify everyone. No need for fighting over your personal team. Picking teams and, oh, I'm team blue. No, I'm team red. Oh, I hate team red. Oh, I heard that you said this bad thing. Oh, well, that makes you bad. And I'm going to reject everything you say. That's bullshit team sports nonsense. We don't need to do that anymore because now we have a new definition of spirituality. So what? We have a new definition. So what do we do with that? We can demonstrate it. Now we can not only use this definition as the starting point, the launching point for a new dialectic on spirituality. So what's spirituality now? The understanding and experience of the highest aspect and integration of the highest aspects of self and reality that happens through the logos, well, happens via the logos through the structure of the dialectic. Now, how will that demonstrate itself? What's a demonstration of that? Who can we think of an example of somebody talking about the highest aspects of self and reality that has integrated it into their being so they can use it in conversation, in reflection, and they are specifically using the logos and dialectic? Hang on a second. That's our friend Socrates in the Meno. That's literally what we're reading. Socrates as someone who has integrated it and is using the dialectic. So, how is he using it? Can we look at the Meno that we're reading and see many divisions of the thumbs up? Can we see many divisions or examples of Socrates using the dialectic in the text? Yes, that's what we're doing. Now, from those many examples, will we be able to, when we get to the end of the text, unify it, come to a new conclusion, a unification of all of those divisions? That's where we're headed. And then after having done that, what? My board froze. I was smoking too hot that the blackboard seized up. There we go. Then that's where we're headed. And then after having reflected on all the different dialectics we've seen in the text, can we come to a conclusion or unification that will allow us to better understand the definition of spirituality? That's where we're headed. Now, the text is starting with a definition of what is virtue. So hopefully at the end, not only will we have a synthesis of the dialectic, we'll be able to analysis means self back to the top, or other back to self, which is the other going back to the top. So hopefully we'll have a conclusion. Not only a deeper and new and more spiritually evolved definition of the dialectic, but also virtue, maybe. Because the definition of the text is, what is virtue and can it be taught? Can it be taught? So that's where we're headed. Lots and lots of fun. Now, so that's the structure of the dialectic that we are just defining. And we just demonstrated. We used it in our thinking. We used it to understand the nature of spirituality and why there must be just simply one paradigm or model of spirituality that can unify all people on the spiritual quest and all human beings who are wanting to understand, even toasters and scooters. Understand the cause of conflict in the world and how to remedy it. That was pretty neat. So we were defining the structure of the dialectic and giving a demonstration of it. And after having gone through it, applying it to scooters and toasters and spirituality and solving conflict, then we can now synthesize that. What do you make of that? Was that fun? Was it interesting? Did it necessarily follow? Was there beauty in how it unfolded? Therefore, was it convincing? Was it necessary and beautiful? And by the way, without being able to structure our thought in this universal way that's accessible to everyone, in other words, if the dialectic isn't the paradigm of spirituality and human relationship, then what would follow? We could do that as well. What would follow? What would be that definition? How would that demonstrate itself? What would be the many different warring conflicts that would happen as a result of not being able to communicate and unify through understanding? Being at the level of opinions and divisions and team sports. Then how would that conclude? What kind of a world? Will Armageddon, the destruction of humanity, the inevitable conclusion of exploitation, capitalism, and fascism that we are playing out? In other words, we are a living dialectic of what happens if the Meno isn't, if we are not learning the dialectic. But right now, today, as people on this channel, we were just doing this. So that's our choice. Really, we have a choice. This is the fundamental choice that we can make as humans. Do you want to be a living dialectic of the Logos? Or do you want to be a living, walking dialectic of the anti-Logos or Pathologos? That eventually culminates in the destruction of your soul, illness, humanity itself, warring conflict between various different opinions and traditions. Now that's globally, but within your soul, at odds with yourself, in conflict with yourself, arguing with yourself, hating yourself, fighting yourself instead of being friendly and reasoning and rational and having fun with yourself. That's your choice, because you can't not be a human being. You can't not have intelligence. You can't not think. People who say just don't think or I think too much, that's bullshit. Trying to get you to hate on your own essence of logos and self-reflection. People who say don't think, they're saying don't think consciously and instead be a slave to your ignorance. Be a slave to the false beliefs that you carry anyway, because you're still going to be thinking, you're still going to be talking, you're still going to be acting, you're still going to be moving, and when you move, you still plan how you're going to move, what are you going to do with the day, what sandwich you're going to eat. That requires thinking, so you're always thinking and judging and reflecting. The difference is the people who say don't judge or don't think or I think too much have been people who have been tricked into this bullshit. You're still thinking, they're telling you to be a slave to your ignorance. Don't do it consciously. Your problems aren't that you're thinking too much. The problems are always how artfully or how excellently you think. Because that's what we are. That's our nature. We have logos, we reflect on ourselves, or we accept cons. We accept pretenders to the throne. We accept distractions instead. Are we going to be using our logos and ability to self-reflect, usia, on what's true, or are we going to accept imitations and be distracted with celebrities and gossip and seeking money and fame and being manipulated by various different people? Because we're still going to be doing it anyway. So that's our choice. Consciousness through the dialectic, or slavery through being a walking dialectic of your ignorance. This requires fun, courage, interest, practice, having some friends, open-mindedness, integrity. This is familiar, it's comfortable, it's easy, but it's bullshit and it will harm you, and anything you do from this will pass on that harm. That's why we call this fate or vice, and this destiny or virtue. So here we have brought it all back. A question of the text is, what is virtue and can it be taught? Does this reflection help us with that question? Can it be taught? What's our new idea of excellence or virtue? Same thing. Choosing this over this. Actively choosing at each moment until it becomes second nature. Conscious dialectic rather than the ignorant dialectic you're going to be doing anyway. In other words, being a walking dialectic based on false definitions that you play out in every area of life, leading to your negative conclusions. You're repeating cycles of failure and negative states of mind. Vice. This is what we're learning on the channel. This is what Socrates is teaching us. Or, that's the question, is he teaching us, or is he just demonstrating us, giving us the conditions for us to learn it ourselves? Maybe it can't be taught. That's one of the questions. Does Meno learn? If not, why not? And if he doesn't learn, what do we have to do differently from Meno so that we can learn this? Learn what? Accepting this, taking this choice and not this. Letting go of what's familiar, comfortable, our ignorance, our opinions, our way of being that leads to our same conflicts and misery in all areas of our life and globally and spiritually. Giving up that to practice understanding the dialectic, demonstrating it all the time in all the areas of your life, reflecting on your whole day to better understand the dialectic and doing it again tomorrow. Can that be taught? Can you go to a lecture and learn that? Or is it something you necessarily, because of its nature of having demonstration, you have to actually do? And you have to do it all the time. And then you have to talk about it and reflect about it with your partner, with yourself, with your friends at the end of the day, so you can better understand it and then do it again tomorrow. In other words, is it a way of living that you can't be taught? You can't pay $1,000 at a seminar for life coaching or a Tony Robbins or an alpha male Sigma grind set podcast. You can't pay for the course because it's something you have to choose at every moment and do. If that's the case, and again, this is just a hypothesis, we're going to hold on to it and see if it pans out the more we read. If this is the case, does it help us make sense of Socrates' reaction to Meno's first question? Hey, can virtue be taught? Whoa, what are you talking about, man? Do you even know what virtue is? If you knew what virtue is, how can you even ask that question? You're clearly ignorant. Does it make sense of how come it was so obvious and comical to Socrates right at the beginning without even having to say anything else to him? You sound like someone in Gorgias' school. You sound like someone from that town. You probably have a partner like this. If that's the question you're asking, can virtue be taught? How can you even, what do you mean? That's crazy. And Meno's response is, do you know what virtue is? I don't know what virtue is, but I'm willing to discuss it with you through a dialectic. Oh, what does that mean? And that's one of the questions. We still have to make sense of that. But hopefully in this reflection, so we have a bunch of things from the text. We've looked for how Socrates is demonstrating it. We've seen the different divisions of the dialectic in the text, and now we are doing a synthesis to better understand the question itself. We're doing it. So are we being virtuous? Did Meno do this? Are we therefore better than Meno? Are we becoming like Socrates? These are all other questions that come to mind. And I hope some of them are interesting to you and stand out. Because, you know, these people think they know. These people are curious. Because we're always evolving through the dialectic. Isn't that interesting? Yes. Interesting. Now, that was a definition of the dialectic, but let's see how it's been demonstrated in the text. The first one was after Meno gave his personal opinion, pointing to things he liked. Oh, I like that. I liked when Die Hard beat up the bad guys. Oh, I liked when Terminator terminated the bad guys and got all the whatever he won at the end. I liked it when Blade Runner beat up the bad guys and escaped being beaten up himself. That's my idea of virtue. Right? People think that way. Well, again, why? Why can't they come to a definition? And Socrates then goes, okay, that's not a definition. That's a swarm of bees. Let me give you a definition. Now, Socrates' definition: excellence or virtue is a single eidos. Already, he's out of the physical world, has countries and stuff and sea and the shark. He's in the realm of being, because the eidos are aspects of the realm of being. No wonder you're not going to be getting a definition if you can only point to physical examples, because the cause of the examples are principles that exist in being. metaphysical before physical, spiritual. It has to be. If 1 + 1 was a physical thing in the physical world, then you can go to Mars, a different planet, and suddenly 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. But that's insane. 1 + 1 equaling 2 can't be a physical thing you can point to for it to have the influence over all physical things. Just like when we talked about the synthesis or conclusion, one of the ways of concluding was taking all of the divisions and saying, hey, of all of these divisions, like we use all these divisions, all these examples of spirituality, is there one tradition that is the cause of all of the others, that contains the principle that all others participate on in a hierarchical level of success? Now that's the logos, that's the dialectic. That's why this is the spiritual tradition. Right? So, in a similar way, the principles that have to exist on Earth and on Mars and on some planet a million light years away and so on, has to be in the realm of being, because it subsumes and is the cause of all of the others. Just as what we just saw ourselves. And by the way, you can't teach anyone that if you said, hey, by the way, you're a Buddhist. Oh yeah, I love Buddhism. Been doing it for 20 years. Every day I meditate. And then on the weekends, I go sit under a waterfall and chant my mantra. It's really changed my life. I'm even writing a book on it. My whole identity is associated with it. If you said to that person, oh, by the way, Buddhism is just one of the many divisions within the paradigm of the logos and dialectic, and if you don't have the dialectic, you will inevitably reach blocks that you might not be able to push through by your development of chi. So therefore, if you really want to do Buddhism well, you should be also learning philosophical midwifery to address your blocks, and philosophy, both of which are applications of the dialectic. If you told him that, what would he say? Maybe you know someone like that. Oh, I really love Jesus. Oh, I'm all about the Quran, man. Oh, the Vedic scriptures. Oh my goodness. Oh, the Torah. Oh, changed my life. I'm all about that. I even have the funny hat. If you said to that person those things, what would they say? They might laugh at you. They might ignore you. If you provided a really good argument that might challenge their dearly held beliefs, they might get pissed. They might even throw a punch. On the global scale, if they had an army, they might invade. This is the kind of shit that happens. So could you teach it to someone? Or for us to come to that conclusion, did we have to do it ourselves? Did you have to be 16 episodes into this podcast and choose to do this rather than watching a Marvel movie, which has much better special effects? I mean, I have this board. I have little dust particles that's in the background to make it feel like we're in the park, but that's not expensive special effects. You had to invest yourself. You had to be, oh, I really care about this. I'm really seeking virtue. So, excellence is a single eidos. Eidos is the aspects of being. Now, keep in mind, if you are unfortunate enough to study philosophy at university, they translate the word eidos as form, which makes it feel like it's a physical thing. They often do that so they can dismiss it. This is what Plato was saying, and he was bullshit. So we can ignore him. By the way, very common. For example, in the Discord, we've been talking about understanding the cause of genocide. Why is there genocide, and why do people support it? And why do people pretend it's not happening? And one of the examples is, well, you can misrepresent the people reporting it. Oh, this guy's a bad guy. So everything he says is also bad. Now, the person is reporting the facts of the genocide, So instead of relating to the logos, the evidence and reason, and also the cause, we can instead pretend that it's tied to a person. That's authority. When people say, who is to say what's right and wrong? That's the wrong question. That's a question about who. It's about a person. That's belief. Belief is based on a person's dumb opinions. We're not interested in belief. We're interested in understanding. Doesn't matter who's saying it. Socrates says this. Hey, it's easy to disagree with Socrates. It's hard to disagree with the logos. Always Socrates says it. In fact, this might be one of the insights that helps us understand why Socrates begins the text saying, I don't know what virtue is. Maybe he's saying from Socrates, because Meno has a big ego, has a mask he's wearing. Meno and his ego. He thinks he's so great. He's from the school of, like Socrates said. Let's look at it in the text. Socrates said, oh, I know your idea of virtue, of wisdom. You're from this city. They have this, they're famous for their idea of wisdom. And Gorgias, your teacher, has this way of being. They think what it means to be wise is to have a habit of answering any question in a fearless and grand style. Oh, I know everything, just ask me everything, and I'll be fearless and grand in my answers. Interesting. So, if that's Meno, then Socrates is saying, hey, I'm not fearless and grand. I don't know what virtue is, but maybe truth knows, maybe mind knows, maybe self knows. Maybe Socrates and Meno are another example of divisions in the physical world. The thing that knows truth isn't Socrates or Meno or me or you or Palestinians and Israelites. It's the mind itself which is unified, the single mind of the single self. It's not a matter of whose team are you on. Maybe that's why Socrates says, I don't know, but here, let's talk about it. And here, by the way, this is what it is. I don't know it, but here's what it is. Doesn't seem to make sense unless you're thinking of divisions of reality. So, the conversation on Discord. Hey, I don't want to look at the evidence about a genocide because I don't know why you would want to not know the truth. Maybe to support the fairy tale that America is the good guys or the West is the good guys, or maybe it's traumatic and it's too hard to acknowledge that there is genocide happening or whatever. But one way of ignoring the evidence here is to instead attack the person who's reporting the evidence. That's very easy it's easy to contradict Socrates. Oh, back in 500 BC, Socrates said this thing that was wrong. Now I hate him. Now everything he says is wrong. I'm on team anti-Socrates. So there are people, great people, who are reporting these facts, some at the cost of their lives. And there are others who say, oh, this person, he said this thing, therefore he's bad, therefore everything he says is wrong, therefore there's no genocide. These are big leaps in logic that are false. It's called ad hominem, attacking the person, attacking the messenger. Who cares if you like them or not? The facts are what's important. It's very easy to misrepresent a person. Easy. Just take a soundbite and remove all of the context around it. It's nonsense. But it's appealing to those who are not interested in truth, but are interested in finding something to support their ignorance. That's how grifters grift. Usually they don't try and give you new information. They try and prey on your desire to seek validation from the ignorance you already carry. which is why Donald Trump does the whole Christian shtick. He says he's not Christian. He openly says he doesn't like Christianity and religion. He pretends when it suits him because he knows those are already opinions built into a certain population that they're looking for validation for. So, hey, yeah, vote for me and I'll validate your dumb opinions while I grift you, while I scam you, while I destroy the planet, while I support a genocide. Notice, because these are human beings just like you and me, our desire to seek validations from the ignorance we already carry can allow us to be blind to or support genocide. Something that's grotesquely and objectively, undebatably bad. So what? So we need to have kind of courage or virtue maybe that allows us to learn new things. Is Meno going to learn something new? Is Socrates learning something new while being the leader of the dialectic? Do we learn like today, we just gave an example of a dialectic couple. Do we learn something new? I think so. So what? So it's not about physical people. It's not about egos. It's about truth. Now, the truth that we are in, if we want to get to principles, is in the realm of being, which might be accessible only when we realize we are not individuals. We are not many, but we are all the same consciousness or mind, and mind knowing itself is the realm of being. The aspects of the realm of being are the eidos. One of them is virtue. And people who want to reject this because they want validation for their dumb opinions at university, yes, there can be people who want validation from their dumb opinions and their lecturers. In fact, everyone, if they're not in the game of philosophical midwifery, acts this way. So people at university teach a misrepresentation of the word, not as eidos, but as form, like there's a form of a chair in this mysterious place. Obviously, that's stupid and wrong. Therefore, Plato and Socrates are stupid and wrong. Therefore, we can reject them, reject metaphysics, reject the archetype for all unified understanding, all spiritual traditions, and instead get wrapped up in Kant and Hegel and Nietzsche, all these different opinions, many opinions, and never come to a true definition of truth, a true definition of philosophy, but just sell people on many years of courses so I can make a buck, because opinions don't get anywhere other than division and conflict. Then maybe you can become a teacher and pass on the ignorance. That's how philosophy has been taught up until now. Now we can actually read the text ourselves. We don't have to just believe the teacher, because he's the only one who read ancient Greek, or the translator, because we don't know ancient Greek. Well, yes, we do now, because we have the internet. We have a translation called the Balboa translation. So we can read this best translation with the ancient Greek. We can look up the words for ourselves, and so we don't have to just believe or pay money to get people to reflect our own beliefs like Meno. Instead, we can read for ourselves, and we know the word eidos means to behold, and it's beholding an aspect of the metaphysical realm, which is important because Meno can't get to a definition, and a definition isn't a swarm of bees or many examples. So where is it? Can't be in the physical world. So literally, if you want a definition, you're looking for a principle that applies to all of the many things. You're looking for something that has an eternal existence in the metaphysical realm. In other words, if you want to give definitions, you have to be in the game of philosophy. Real philosophy, which is about being. So the very first line on the very first dialectic of Socrates about virtue is, it's a eidos in being. That's what it is. There's your definition. Now, is it perfect? Of course not. There's room for evolving. What kind of eidos is it? How does it relate to the other eidos? How do we get there? How do we integrate it? Many, many questions. But it's a very, very good starting point because it really hammers home right at the beginning the difference between Meno and Socrates, or a materialist and someone who can actually understand things. The difference between scientific inquiry, which looks at physical things and test tubes and physical things, and why scientific inquiry can't come to definitions. The difference between physical or scientific inquiry and true understanding or philosophy. Dianoia, it's called. Really gets it right at the beginning. Uses an eidos. Later on, Socrates says, hey, by the way, one of the comedically tragic, hilariously tragic, theatrically tragic problems you have, Meno, is you were never initiated. You think you've got the answer. You've got a belief that you carry around. You think that's wisdom. It ain't. You need to be initiated into the mystical initiation, which means you need to somehow use your education should have provided you the tools to reflect on yourself, separate from the physical senses sufficiently so your soul can leave your body and experience the realm of being. The reason why you can't actually give a definition is because you haven't done this yet. Or you don't even know that it exists. Even if it's just a belief, you haven't even been given the belief about it. That's the tragic irony here. You haven't been initiated. You haven't experienced the realm of being. So what's your education been about? Nothing. You're just becoming a slave for somebody else's beliefs. That comes through the family tradition and blah, 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 blah. Become a mouthpiece for ignorance. And my first definition, so within the structure of the text, it is a dialectic, but it's a definition kind of dialectic. And so within the definition, within the definition dialectic, defining virtue, I'm going to do a dialectic. And so the definition stage of the definition category is, it's a being, it's an eidos. Big bombshell. If you're not looking to being, you're not doing dialectic right. If you're not looking to being, you're not going to get definitions. If you're not looking to being, you're not in spirituality. If you're not looking to being, you're not doing your job here. You are a walking dialectic of ignorance. Be a walking dialectic of truth. In other words, you're either a dialectic of fate or destiny. That's our choice. And if you want the destiny one, you look into being, my friend. Therefore, it is a kind of learning that goes beyond our physical world because it's about being. That's non-physical. So, allows us to rationally address our purpose as human beings. If you're not going to be, hey, you're going to spend your life learning about mousetraps or toasters? Why? You're only going to be here for 80 years if you're lucky. Then what? Shouldn't you be spending your time learning about something that is eternal and immortal, that your soul returns to after your physical incarnations? Isn't that rational? Therefore, you should be looking to being. Therefore, our destiny is doing the dialectic all times, if you can. Trying your best. That's virtue, by the way, doing your best to do it at all times, which is a kind of excellence. You're not doing it half-hearted. Sometimes I'm going to do some tyranny, but sometimes I'm going to do some dialectic. No, that's not good. Sometimes I'll eat some poison. Sometimes I'll eat healthy. Wow, no, hang on a second. It's doing a walking dialectic directed towards being. Okay, now, if that's the case, and we got that from the very first part of Socrates' definition of virtue, then does that help us understand why Meno is a bit stuck? We could also have another question. Does Meno change? Does he learn? If he doesn't, could this be the key pin? Could this be the keystone? Could this be the turning point? Maybe the reason why he's so stuck is he can't accept there is such a thing as a non-physical dimension of reality that's causal of the physical one. Maybe he hasn't even thought of it. Maybe he can't accept it. There are lots of people who struggle with this. All we know is our physical world, and maybe you grew up in a materialist society. They value material possessions. Maybe your family never asked questions about the realm of being, which would mean your family are ignorant. But they're my dearly loved, they're my ma and pa, I love them so much. I can't learn something that would show them to be ignorant. I love them. This is a problem. Blind loyalty to ignorance because they happen to be the people who raised you. That's why we need philosophical midwifery. So there are many reasons why we might be averse or real or be repulsed or reject the existence of a realm of being. Whatever it is, find your own in philosophical midwifery, which we do on the channel, because maybe that's what Meno lacks. Maybe he hits this block and therefore he isn't able to learn from Socrates, and he is never able to. Well, that's a question. Does Meno ever give a definition of virtue? If he is, that means he has at least accepted the possibility of being. He may not have experienced it yet, but he's on the right path because he's directing his understanding or dialectic to being, which is needed for a definition. But it's also needed for spiritual development. And our purpose here as human beings. We're in a game. I keep thinking of Dark Souls. Dark Souls is a video game where you're kind of plopped into this world and you're not told what your goal is. You're going to have to figure it out while you're there. You don't have to. You can spend your game walking around in circles, but it gets stupid and boring really quickly. And there are many characters you encounter who have given up on finding the goal of the game. They're all depressed, sad adventurers, and they're like, oh, another one. Oh, another adventurer. Oh, well, I've given up. Maybe you should give up too. There are various different kinds of people in the game who have given up in various different ways, which is why it's pretty cool and fun. But your job in the game is to figure out the goal of the game so you can play the game well. That's us. We are plopped into this game. No one told us what the goal is. We have to figure it out while we're here. There are many people who've given up in various ways and have various problems, depressions, illnesses. That's their pathologos. That's why we do midwifery, to overcome our blocks. But what we are doing here on this channel is figuring out the rules of the game. The goal of the game, well, the rules of the game is a dialectic. In other words, even these people are still following the rules. They're still doing dialectics. They're just doing it negatively. We also need to find the goal. What are we here for? So that we can also figure out the game rules. We're going to do both. Figure out the goal, figure out the rules or the structure, and apply this to that. Well, the goal, the rules and the structure, the dialectic. What we apply it to, Socrates is telling us, is being. And of course it is. If you're plopped into this world as a human being, and one thing's for certain, you're going to die, where do you go next? Where did you come from? And where are you going? These two things have to inform what you should be doing here. Therefore, it's rational and makes sense that we should be directing our learning, dialectic, to being. Not only is it rational and makes sense for us to be a mature and rational player in the human game, it's also absolutely necessary to have understanding or definitions to unify the many into a one. That's called understanding. That's what a definition is. So Meno can't give a definition of virtue because he's not directing his understanding to being. One of the reasons why Meno is failing so far. Maybe he turns it around. Anyway, so the first part of Socrates' definition, dialectic. So he has later on, he has a dialectic based on demonstration. So you could say he's doing dialectics, which has definition and demonstration in it, and division and conclusion. But the text has, but he has many which are itself examples of dialectic, which is wild, like amazing to think this way. He has really integrated dialectic into his whole being to function in such a brilliant way, and probably so has Plato. Not sure about that one yet, but amazing. Lots to wonder about, which again, we said the definition of spirituality is we came to a new conclusion that it was to do with the dialectic, but it was also being able to integrate and use it. So here's Socrates integrating the dialectic at such a high level. So the definition of virtue, it's a single being, okay? How does it demonstrate? How do you use it? So virtue is the self. What can you say about it itself or the subject? It's an eidos, okay? How does it relate to another? Now the other is picking us because we want virtue. How do we use this aspect of being? We keep our eye on it when we do a dialectic. He said it. So not only is the dialectic the way up, the paradigm of spirituality, and how we get understanding, how we get definitions, how we unify our soul, how we unify humanity. But once you're there, you keep your eye on it. You don't just have it and then you forget about it, which is what happens to some people in meditation or on drugs or various different other ways that they've had glimpses or encounters of the realm of being. They give it up. They can't hold on to it. We're not doing that. We are using understanding, dialectic, to get there. We're using understanding to make sense of it while we're there. And then once we come back into our body, we're using our understanding to keep it by keeping our eye fixed on it. Isn't that cool? One of our aspects of spirituality is not just understanding the realm of being or the spirit realm, not just experiencing it, but maintaining it, integrating it, evolving. So that's cool. Socrates has given us what we need for our definition of spirituality in his first two lines. And this is interesting. So we can also learn about the dialectic in this way. Start from the top. Start from your highest definition. Use your highest vision and understanding. It might turn out that the person you're talking to has already gotten there. It's like, oh yeah, no, I get that. Like, hey, how did you come to this? So you meet up with your friend for coffee. Cheers. When we say coffee, we have to drink of coffee on this channel. It's a fun game that we play. How did you get to the coffee shop? Oh, I was on my scooter. Now that's just your highest definition. You've unified the parts of your scooter, all of the things that you use a scooter for. Now, if your friend doesn't know what a scooter is, he can say, what's that? Now you can go down. Oh, it's something I use to travel places. Oh, I still don't understand. Oh, then I go down further. So here is Socrates. So we're learning about the dialectic. Start from your highest. Some people will get it, some people won't. If they don't, that's okay. You go from the give an example of it, demonstration. They still don't understand, break it down to its divisions. So, what's virtue? It's an eidos. Really high. Wow. What do we do with it? We keep our eye on it. When? When we're doing the dialectic. How often are we doing the dialectic? Sometimes we're doing the dialectic. Sometimes we are unconsciously letting our ignorance do a dialectic because we're never not doing a dialectic. You always have a definition of self and reality that you are acting on in every area of your life that leads to conclusions. You're either doing it on a false idea of self and reality or truth. That's your choice. Vice or virtue. Not playing ignorant, playing dumb. Whoa, I don't know. No, you're doing it anyway, pal. You are still acting. You are still thinking. You are still having dreams. You are still having daydreams. You are still having fantasies. The question is, do you want to be doing it for vice or virtue? Do you want to be bad or good? Now, maybe that's too simple, because it's not bad in a sense. You're not bad because everyone is given ignorance. But that's how you're functioning. So, how often are we going to be doing dialectic? And how often are we going to be being bad? A silly question, isn't it? Oh, I'm going to be great now, but I'm going to kick that puppy later. Maybe if I'm really good with my study, then I'll give myself a reward by kicking that puppy. No, not thumbs up, thumbs down. Thumbs down. 2 thumbs down for kicking puppies. Puppies are amazing. Sad rain. So, silly question, right? So how often are we doing the dialectic? All the time. So how often are we keeping our eye on the realm of being? All the time, my friends. Isn't that interesting? So we are also getting an insight into what it means to be an enlightened person. What Socrates is like. One yoga that was passed on to me back in the day, passed on to me, has been talked about, just open to anyone, is a kind of acting as if. Some people say fake it till you make it. Acting as if you are enlightened. One way of sidestepping your pathologos thoughts that you're not good enough. I can't be like Socrates. Well, what would it be like if you were? Now do it. Don't act that way. That's what we're learning from Socrates. What would it like to actually have that spiritual enlightenment that we have just defined? Well, that's what Socrates is doing. This is important because you have to recognize it. If you're on this task to know and show yourself fully, how do you know when you're there? How do you know you're enlightened? Is it when Ma and Pa pat you on the head and say, "Oh, you're a good Jew," or "You're a fantastic Taoist. You've really seen the Tao. We all give you a thumbs up." Is that a mark of enlightenment? No, almost certainly not, because everyone else who isn't in this game of removing their false beliefs are going to be challenged by true enlightenment, because it's opposite or against their stupid, dumb opinions that they are blindly loyal to. So if anything, the more pats on the head from family and society, the further away you're likely to be, which is Meno's position. He is loved by his society, not just his, but the one next door, and his family, and his teacher, and his partner, even though he's way off the mark. So, again, it's not about the many. So, what is our mark that we've reached it? This is one of the reasons why we're not just learning about the dialectic, but learning about Socrates. So we can recognize someone who has integrated spirituality, has evolved. So, what kind of a person is Socrates? Well, he's someone who always has his eye on being. Wow! Even in the physical world, he somehow has his eye on being? How can that be possible? There's a joke within the philosophical groups. You don't want to be in the brilliant light of being, which is the direct, full experience of the realm of being. You don't want to be in that when you're driving a car or eating a sandwich. Because you crash a car, number one. Or if you're eating a sandwich, you might not know when to stop eating when the sandwich stops and your hand begins. Now, that's funny for those people who have a greater familiarity with what it's like to be in the realm of being. Seems a bit silly for the rest of us. But this might be what they're talking about. When you're in your physical body, you don't want to be ignorant of reality. Forget it. Like when you're dreaming, you don't want to think the dream world is real. You still want to be aware of the real world. Okay, bad example because our everyday world isn't real, the real world, because that's being. So how do we keep an eye on it? How do we not fall into the other dialectic of doing a dialectic of the false idea of reality and self? Because you're going to be doing one or the other. There has to be a way of somehow keeping your eye on being even when you are in your soul and not in the direct experience. Socrates is depicted in some of the works as just standing still under a tree, or in a funny way, the next door neighbor's front porch. He just stands there because he's in the realm of being, but his body has to stand still. Otherwise, I don't know what's going to happen. But when he comes back into his body, he goes to the party and he talks about the realm of being. That's the symposium. So we're learning about what it would mean to actually have achieved enlightenment and do it. That's one of the methods. As if. Be Socrates, which is what we're doing anyway. By reading the text with the highest level of integrity and reflecting on it using the dialectic, we are being like Socrates. We are being like the paradigm, being like the dialectic. If we do the dialectic at all times, we're being like the dialectic. And if the dialectic is the highest aspect of being, we are using likeness as our method or yoga for evolution and spiritual development. To be either like the Logos or to be like Socrates. So, hopefully some questions from that. If this is what virtue is, it's an eidos in being, and how it demonstrates is we keep our eye on it whenever we do dialectic, which for us is at all times. What is that telling us about our friend Socrates here? Which we want to be like. There's Socrates waving at us. There's his beard. And everything you learn about him, do it. Be like it. Take that definition of what it's like to be Socrates and demonstrate it. Try and keep your eye on being at all times while using the dialectic at all times. You don't have to have had the experience, but the more we read, the more... This is meditation. Meditation is imagination. Use your imagination to, as fully as you can, with the greatest level of integrity, using the highest terms from the text itself, create an image of what being is. And all of the Platonic dialogues usually talk about it. I think so, most of them at least. So the more you read, the more you can build that image of what being is. So you've got a dialectic using your highest understanding, and dialectic uses questions, so using your highest understanding with questions, which keeps you open and curious, using your highest vision or imagination at all times with sustained focus. Formally, this is all of the conditions of meditation. So not only are you being like Socrates and having fun and having really cool kick-ass conversations over coffee, you're formally doing meditation. So what? So there's no difference between being a conscious human being, choosing doing the dialectic on the good, instead of the default doing the dialectic on the false idea of self and reality. There's no difference than being a conscious human being and meditation. There's no difference between philosophy and meditation. It's not a union of East and West, Western philosophy and Eastern experience. No, it's just being a conscious human being. It's not a team sport. It's not a bringing teams together. Why? Because formally all of the what you'll be doing anyway, by doing a dialectic at all times as best you can with friends and by yourself, and when you're playing guitar or writing stories or whatever else you're doing, doing a dialectic at all these times, keeping an eye on being. There's formally all the conditions for meditation. You don't have to sit on a mat. You don't have to have a fancy mantra or a special secret koan question or sit under a waterfall or sweep up at the ashram for 40 years. Just be you. Follow your natural curiosity about definitions that exist in being with your friends, and just use thinking as best you can, which is the dialectic. It's nothing other than being you, which you're doing anyway, only on what's false. That's why we do philosophical midwifery, to uncover the false ideas of self and reality that we are unconsciously doing a dialectic on, that confounds us and puzzles us because it just causes problems over and over again, repeating cycles of problems and stagnation. Whereas the dialectic, as we saw today, evolves up. In other words, just be you. Do you, but with excellence. In other words, learn the rules of the game, learn the goal of the game, and have fun in the game. Because in Dark Souls, you as a player is having way more fun than all the other NPC adventurers who've given up on finding the goal and learning how to play the game, learning how to upgrade their character, learning the rules and the goal. They've given up and they're sad. They're all sad. Some are crazy. Some are crazy, but sad in different ways. So in other words, just be happy. Be happy. Be you. With integrity. Don't play dumb to everything you learned today. Try it out. Oh, it doesn't agree with my opinions. So what? You're going to agree with your ignorance? That's having no integrity. No courage. These are the virtues that we learn about in the Republic, the individual virtues. Focus, courage, keeping yourself ordered, temperance, using the logos as your guide, using the dialectic as your guide, that's the virtue of wisdom. Doing it at all times, that's justice. So, ordering every part of your soul towards this goal, temperance. Having the courage, the spirit to do it even in the ups and downs, to do it at all times, that's courage. Using the logos and the dialectic as your model, that's wisdom. And doing all of it at all times, that's justice. That's the 4 virtues. So, you are meditating. You are a master of meditation right now. The difference is, you are doing it on what's false and causing your problems, and we call that fate. Or pathologos. You're a master of meditation, you've just had a bad teacher. You're focusing it in the wrong way. Like Meno. You are like Meno. We are all like Menos. We all have a Gorgias teacher in our life. Just like there's a show, Stranger Things. There's the evil Gorgias that wants to eat up the children. We all have a Gorgias. A teacher that taught us the way Meno has been taught. So, but we're all masters. We're all great, fantastic students to that teacher. We're all masters of meditation. The difference is, do we want to learn the rules of the game? That's key aspect of excellence, virtue. Can it be taught? It's really something you got to do. Try it and talk about it. Reflect on how well it goes with your friends. End the blocks. And use midwifery to address the blocks. So you are a walking meditation. You are already a master. You just have to direct your attention to the true subject of your meditation mastery, which is what? Being. And how? Dialectic. With what frame of mind? Asking questions and genuinely focus on wanting to find the answers. How often? At all times, for all definitions. You want to know what health is? You don't want to know what size is? You know what strength is? That applies to what? Different teams or groups? Nope. Men and women and children and white and black. Everyone, all times. So what was his conclusion? Therefore, all ideas don't differ, whether demonstrated in men or women. That's our synthesis from the divisions. Because for men and women, okay, so what's the definition? It's an eidos. How do we use it? We keep our eye on it at all times while doing the dialectic at all times. That's what virtue is. That's what virtue is. He's telling us. Okay? Is it the same for men and women? Well, let's look. Is health the same for men and women? Sure. Size, is that the same for men and women? Sure. Strength, men and women? Yeah. It's not different for men and women. Therefore, from that, we can come to a conclusion. All ideas don't differ. So any divisions into team sports, be it gender, be it sex, be it race, be it religion, be it culture, be it time, be it planet, be it species, we're all doing it. We're all in the same game. Therefore, excellence doesn't differ. So that's our conclusion from the division. Now, conclusion has two steps: synthesis, that's our unification, and then we take that, we apply it back to the start. Therefore, not only so all ideas don't differ, universally true for everyone, but specifically back to the start, excellence, virtue doesn't differ. So what do we mean? So what's our conclusion? Is keep our eye on being at all times, doing the dialectic, whether you're a man or woman, old, young, whatever you're doing. Therefore, we have a watertight, we have a sound, no, maybe not watertight, but a sound, rational, fair, just, dialectical explanation of how we can be a walking dialectic of truth and not problems. In other words, a walking meditation at all times, just like Socrates. This shows it's possible. We have defined it. Now we've got to demonstrate it. Your life is a walking meditation of the walking dialectic and meditation. And he is saying, hey, look, you can do it on truth. Have fun. So, in Socrates' first dialectic of what virtue is, he gave us the steps that shows that it's possible, and what it is. What's excellence? Being a walking dialectic, focused on being and not our false opinions about being at all times, whether you're a man or woman, which is all of the conditions of meditation and all of the conditions of understanding. Isn't that cool? So not only does it show it's possible, so whenever we get the thought saying, oh no, I can't be like Socrates, or I can't apply it now while I'm at work, or well, I'm just a woman, I'm just a dumb broad, any of those things, you have yourself the 4-part structure of a counter to it. You can have a conversation with that part of your mind and say, hey, look, let's go through it. That's called treating your mind as a friend. Socrates often talks about this. If your friend said, if you said, hey, you know what? I want to play football. And your friend said, oh, you can't play football. You wouldn't go, oh yeah, I guess I can't. You wouldn't automatically agree with him. You'd ask him, well, why do you say that? What, do you think I'm too short or I'm not fit enough? What are you seeing? And let's reason through the definition of your argument, how it would play out, the possibilities of it, and this conclusion. Let's reason through it together. That's how you would talk to a friend. Treat your mind like a friend. If a voice comes in and says, I can't be constantly meditating simply by being a conscious, rational being, which is nothing other than using the dialectic in everything I do, even if I'm a man or a woman, which keeps my eye on being, I can't live that way. Ask it why. Why? In what way is myself inadequate? Now, you have two options from there. You can reason with it, and now you have this argument. By the way, this is a definition of excellence or virtue. This is how it's demonstrated. This is how it shows. It doesn't matter if I'm a woman. Doesn't matter if I'm doing something else. This is the conclusion. So you're wrong, friend. You're wrong. That's one option. Now, eventually, you're going to have to do the other option as well, which is, by the way, what made you think of that to begin with? Because you sounded so certain. Our inner Meno. Meno is so certain that virtue is different for men and women. Right? Sexist. Frankly speaking. He's so certain that virtue is harming your enemies and being good to your friends and escaping any harm yourself. Very confident. He straddles up to Socrates and says, hey, you know that virtue that both you and I know? Do you think we can teach people it? Hang on a second, son. That voice that tells us that we are not worthy, self, or reality lacks integrity, isn't intelligent, caring, and specifically directed to you and communicating with you at all times for your benefit. Anything that says that self or reality is negative against that idea of reality, or the self is unworthy, is false. It's evidence of a pathologos. And we'll be very certain. And we're used to just agreeing with it, but not anymore. Socrates doesn't just agree with Meno just because he, as we read, answers the questions in such a confident way. Let's see it in the text. Habit of answering in a fearless and grand style. Just because Meno is confident doesn't mean Socrates is going along with him. So too with our inner Meno. Just because it's confident when it says reality lacks highest integrity and care, or self is inadequate, doesn't mean you agree with it. Reason with it the same way Socrates does. And do the other thing we do on that channel, which is philosophical midwifery, which is the same dialectic. So you're still doing a dialectic, you're still meditating, you're still a walking meditation. Only we're doing a dialectic on the cause of our false beliefs. That self is inadequate or reality is lacks highest integrity. Because the more you do that, and you see how this differs from this, you can compare the two, this voice will stop coming up, start to dissolve. Its power will wane, and then eventually it will go, because it's serving a purpose. Everything you do as you reach higher steps in your growth, every level, you have to be told this is inconsistent with this. If you become a vet, you can't be a good vet and also carry the false belief that cats are girls and dogs are boys. You can't have both. At every level of learning at veterinary college, you are given, your mind presents your false beliefs that are inconsistent with your goal. You have a choice. You can give up on becoming a vet and keep this ignorance about cats and dogs being boys and girls that get married. That's where kittens come from, and puppies. Or you can give up this one to become a good vet. That's our choice. You can't have both. Equally so, if our spiritual quest is to know the highest reaches of reality or mind and self, then any lesser, inadequate, not good enough, I'm a stinky head idea of self and reality can't also be held while in this state of being or experience. You can't have both. So that Meno voice will come up and say, hey, shut up. Or hey, you reject it because I don't like this person. This person's, he's got some red flags. I'm going to ignore what they say. I side with, I'm team anti-Socrates. Or my parents won't like me if I think in this way. Anything that tries to shut down the logos has at its cause, okay, anti-logos or pathologos, has at its cause a false belief about self and reality that's inconsistent with the truth and your highest evolution or your true self and reality. So you have to choose one or the other. That's your goal. At all times, because we're doing the dialectic at all times. So at all times, we have an opportunity to choose truth over false, excellence over ignorance, virtue over vice. Every moment we have an opportunity to do that. Every opportunity we have a choice to choose dialectic or not. Well, we can't not choose dialectic. Unconscious dialectic on what's causing our problems, our pathologos, or conscious dialectic until this becomes automatic, like Socrates. Every moment we have a choice. Now, how do you know which one is the right one? Because this belief about yourself, this Meno voice, feels true and it's familiar. Well, this one will try and sabotage the logos, end conversation, make you blind to the evidence, not try and demonstrate it, not try and apply it here. Logos is our guide. Logos is our tool. Logos is our path, but also Logos is our guide or signal. One voice will try and stop the Logos, stop your path of using the dialectic as you evolve towards being and self, and one will keep the conversation open. Notice when Meno says, "Oh yeah, I know what virtue is," Socrates is like, "Well, let's have a conversation." And even when Meno is a bit butthurt or trying to cope, Socrates keeps the conversation open. Look at all of Socrates' dialogues. He talks some real jerks. He keeps the conversation open. And in some of the dialogues, he has to use some great skills. Because some people are like, "Oh, well, everyone here is busy, so we can stop talking about it," or people will get mad at you if you say that, Socrates, or you know, this guy said this one thing and I disagree with that, so everything you say is wrong. These are all bullshit techniques used to silence the Logos. Now Socrates has to use skills to avoid those, to keep the conversation going. That's our signal post. Just like your friend, the inner Meno, treat it like a friend. "Oh, you stink, don't play soccer. You stink, don't do this." Hang on a second, let's keep the conversation open. You don't get the final word, buddy. It's a relationship. Being a philosopher isn't a one-off thing. You have to keep your eye on it. It's a relationship, it's a way of being. So what? So now we have an understanding of the steps, of the reasoning that you can reason with that. And after you've reasoned with it, you can say, "Hey, by the way, later on today or whatever, I am going to do philosophical midwifery, which is the same dialectic applied to the cause of you, inner Meno." Actually, he's mad. Because I know that this dialectic I'm doing is leading me to the highest development, which means I have to uncover these false beliefs about myself that are inconsistent with this along the way. Got to do it. Otherwise, you're going to have to sacrifice this. And I'm a musician. So I've seen musicians, the whole world has seen many great musical artists, or many artists who, as they can have success and they have success, but they suddenly get to a level of success where they are forced to address their negative beliefs about self and reality because it's inconsistent. Now, Linkin Park is a recent example. Chester, the lead singer of Linkin Park, often talked about a really negative view of himself, and he often talked about how it was confusing to him because he has friends, people like his music, he does very well, but he feels like he is inadequate. But he is performing at the highest levels of musicianship. Suicide. Oh, can I say that on YouTube? I don't know. He ended his life. happens often in any area. Oh, you can? Oh, thank you. I see people like using euphemisms. So I think, oh, it's against the terms of service or something. Now, there are other ways of going about it. Give up on your goal, stop playing music. And that's one way of not playing music. But in other words, it's universal. You can see it. You can see it played out dramatically in others, but we want to learn from it ourselves. So what? So that's what philosophical midwifery is for, and we have that series on the channel. So we're reading both at the same time. At the time of recording, we're in chapter 2 of the midwifery book, while we're also reading Meno. But it's addressing that Meno, the inner Meno, the inner negative voice. That's here for a reason. It seems negative, and if you believe it, you will be a walking dialectic of your problems. That's fate. But if you don't just believe it, because we're not interested in belief, we're philosophers. Doesn't matter how confident that voice sounds or how tall the funny hat is of that preacher. We're not going to believe him. We want to understand for ourselves. Doesn't matter. We're not going to be a walking dialectic of that voice. We're going to question it and address it with the dialectic to find its causes. That's philosophical midwifery. That's escaping fate, or what Socrates calls purification, that allows you freedom. If you're not doing midwifery, you ain't free. Now, what do you do with that freedom? This. Get back to your job. Now, the Phaedo, Socrates says a similar thing. After you separate from your body, what do? You're going to fly around the room, going to become what they call a metaphysical tourist, go visit France and see the Eiffel Tower because you're able to separate yourself from the body. You can, but so what? Who cares? Why not get back to what you were doing anyway? Get back to the dialectic on being, which is the gateway to the self, by the way. Only separated from your physical body, you don't have to go to the bathroom, you don't have to eat. You have less distractions, physical distractions. You still will have the pathologos distractions, but by the way, they're diminished when you're out of body. So you have a little bit more freedom to do this. Same thing. Same thing as it applies to removing your problems, silencing the inner Meno, resolving it. Once you have no negative self-talk, or you have freedom, what are you going to use that freedom for? This, my friends, says Socrates. Gaining definitions, which is the dialectic applied to being, which you can do it at all times, whether you're a man or a woman. Ooh. Revolutionary idea back in the day. So, handy first dialectic that we're given. Now, the second dialectic Socrates gives us, just as a revision, we could say is a dialectic on demonstration. How do you demonstrate virtue? Meno starts us off. Oh, it's managing well. For a man, it's managing the city well. For a woman, it's managing the house well. Yeah. And how do we demonstrate managing well? Well, we have to be even-tempered. You can't be flying off the handle. Can't be distracted by many different desires. That's called temperance. And you have to be managing in a fair way. So temperance and justice are the Greek words. Are the words that's how you demonstrate managing well. Okay, so whether you're a man, a woman, a child, or elderly, or a slave, he said, if you do have, okay, so this is another explanation of the dialectic. You can do both, what it is and its opposite, to show how one leads to contradictions and one is necessarily so, and beautifully so. Whether you're a man or woman, if you have temperance and justice, you will have success because it will help you do the thing good. This way of managing whatever you're managing leads to being good at it. If you are untemperate, if you're anger, flying off the handles, distracted, temperance is having all the parts of your soul unified on a singular focus. For us, is doing the dialectic with an eye on being at all times. But, oh, I want to eat all the sandwiches, or I want to become famous, or whatever. That's not temperance. Being harmonized and unified towards a singular goal, which is, again, meditation. If you're unjust, if you're not following principles and being unfair, you'll get failure. Therefore, the conclusion, synthesis, if virtue is not in self, now the word self has the honorific being, if virtue wasn't in being and was just a physical thing, again, Stoicism, that's what Stoicism is. Stoicism uses the same words, but they remove the realm of being. Or materialism, again, that's by definition, the rejection of the realm of being. If virtue was not in being, then people could not be good in the same way. It has to be universally accessible, meaning it can't be a physical thing that men can get but slaves can't, or elderly are too old and feeble to reach, and women can't do it because they have ovaries. But we just demonstrated in the division that men and women and children and elderly become good in the same way. In what way? When they are managing well with temperance and justice. It has to be universal. It has to be a principle. Therefore, it has to be in being. Again, reiterating the idea that this is about being. Understanding, principles, virtue, being good, having success. All of these things necessarily are about being, having our eye on being, functioning with reference to being. Therefore, there's two parts of the conclusion, synthesis and analysis. This was our synthesis. We have to take this back to our start. Therefore, what is virtue? How does virtue demonstrate itself? Managing yourself. Why? Because who are children managing? A business? Their toys, their Legos? Who does a slave get to manage? No one, they're a slave. So for it to be, for people to be good in the same way, again, it has to be Legos. Legos are important. Yes. Right. If you don't manage them justly and leave them on the floor, you will stand on them and they will hurt your feet. And that will be a failure. And you will scream and then you will lose your temperance. Right, so managing the self. So how does virtue demonstrate itself? Managing yourself. And by the way, if you are demonstrating virtue by managing yourself, you are going to be acting justly and never unjustly. And this doesn't add much content, but we are carrying on the content from the previous one. So what was the definition of virtue? And we had a whole dialectic to define it. It's keeping your eye focused on a single eidos, whatever you do while doing the dialectic. And what do you do with that? Next stage, demonstration. You use that to manage yourself well. So we talked about managing the inner voice, the inner Meno, using it in your relationships, using it when you meet with your friend for coffee. Cheers. Managing yourself well. And by the way, here's an extra bit of care and providence and beautiful goodness extended to us. Socrates is showing us, not belief, giving us the steps. So it's not being taught like a belief can be, but giving us the steps to follow for our own understanding and reasoning, to learn it, not taught it, learn it, to learn that if we are doing that, doing our best to manage ourselves with the dialectic, with our eye on being, then Socrates is saying, you're always going to be just, my friend. You're never going to be acting unjustly if that's what you're trying to do. So if you're interested in being a fair person, a good person, a just person, not only are you more likely to get success and reach the good, but you can be assured Even if you don't feel it yet, even if that Meno voice is telling you that you stink, you can be assured rationally that you are going to be just. Now, this won't feel true, but that's courage. Courage is holding on to what the Logos says is true, even though it doesn't feel true, because you're learning. You have to keep practicing it until it becomes true, second nature. And you've removed that voice. So, our definition, what's our conclusion? Is an eidos that you keep your eye on and being that never differs. So you're always doing it. Okay, and how do you use it, or demonstration? How does it function? To manage yourself well. Have temperance when you do it. Try and keep your cool when you do a dialectic, which can be difficult. It will help you reach success, become the good. And if you are doing that, by the way, you are always going to be just. So it's a standard for justice. The next dialectic was on division. Now, this gave us questions because the division dialectic wasn't on the various divisions of virtue. It was divisions of dialectics. He did a dialectic on color. He did a dialectic on shape. As practice for answering questions of excellence and virtue. That's where, so he uses geometry. He used a very simple geometry definition. So he said, look, I've given you 2 demonstrations of the dialectic. Now I'm going to break it down even further, division. So that you, Meno, can yourself synthesize and analyze it, come to a conclusion, and you use it. Meno said, well, I like the dialectic you did that talked about physical things. And Socrates says, oh, he face palmed and goes, of course you did. Of course you did. Let's see it in the text. So the division was interesting. So it gave us some puzzles. Why was the division, if the definition was about virtue and the demonstration was about virtue, why was the division about dialectic? Which makes us wonder, how does virtue and dialectic connect? So, Meno says, I'm unable to know the way in which you carry out your search. How do you find a single virtue that applies to all? And then Socrates says, yeah, of course you do. Reasonably indeed. Yeah, of course you don't. And then he explains it with color and shape, and we went through that, and geometry as well. And by the way, we can, in this channel, down the line, if there's interest, we can get into learning Euclid, which is the best non-philosophical way of understanding the dialectic, because Euclid applies it to geometry. You can create a complete understanding of 2-dimensional geometry just following the structure of the dialectic. So you get 2 things. You get an understanding of geometry as a complete system. Now, almost complete. You have to, it's not philosophy, so it does require one movement into the different, from the 2-dimensional realm into the 3D realm. But let's leave that aside for now. It is an example of understanding and also a practice of the dialectic. So if there's a community down the line that wants to get into that, that's an opportunity. But he mentions that he talks about it briefly as a quick demonstration of how to do the dialectic. Here it is here. So would you call a boundary the limit or extremity? This is literally Euclid. They were doing Euclid too. Therefore, do you call something a plane and a solid? So do you know the definition of plane and solid? Are you familiar with the first definitions of Euclid? Therefore, and then he goes to some reasoning, and out of the admissions we've made already, I mean by shape applies to every shape, so it's a principle. That by which a solid is bounded is shape. So putting it together, I will say that shape is the limit of a solid. So he defined what a limit was to do with boundary. He said, do you already know the definition of solid? Yes. So let's put it together. So he's giving an example of how to reason. The 4 stages of the dialectic, which also is used in geometry. Meno wants answers instead of learning how to think. And Socrates makes fun of him. Says, oh, even a blindfolded person knows that you're hot. Because only hot people in the flower of their bloom go around demanding answers like a spoiled brat, acting like a tyrant. So he's insulting him, but he's kind of, again, artfully, this is his bedside manner. We're friendly. We're not just saying, hey, don't be an idiot and demand answers. Are you not putting it together? It's not about getting answers. It's learning how to do dialectic at all times, learning how to think, learning how to reason, learning how to be. He doesn't say that. He says, oh, you must be really good looking, because only a really good looking person can go around demanding answers from people. And I'm at a severe disadvantage because I'm not as beautiful as you. So telling the truth, but saying it in a nice way. He mentions his teacher Gorgias to give a kind of a different way of giving a dialectic, more like Gorgias. And Meno says, I like that one. So what's Gorgias? What made Gorgias's dialectic different? And that made Meno prefer that one. And Socrates says, yeah, I know you prefer that one. And that is comedically tragic or theatrically tragic. Comedy and tragedy together. It's funny how tragic it is that you prefer that dialectic. Because it's the one that I used physical things for. Sight and vision, perceptible to our sight. So color is the flow from shapes that are symmetrical and perceptible to sight. That was our conclusion. What does that mean? And Socrates says, this is why it's a problem. You left your education before the mysteries, and therefore you remained uninitiated. You didn't learn your dialectic and practice it sufficiently enough that you are able to, again, it's meditation, separate your soul from your physical senses and have that initiation experience of the realm of being that we call the mysteries because it's not told to everyone. As we said before, imagine going up to a Buddhist and say, hey, you know how you're fully into Buddhism and you think it's the be all and end all and your job is about it now and you love it and you've been doing it for 40 years. It's just a subset of the true spiritual tradition called the dialectic. What would happen? They'd get pissed, or they'd ignore you, or laugh at you, or gang up on you, get all his friends to beat you up or whatever. Always happens. It's part of the human experience. Therefore, it was part of the mysteries. You had to show you were a good actor, you were genuinely interested. You have been practicing the dialectic. You're interested in doing midwifery to overcome your blocks. Right. So they get pissed and you can just smile, nod, and walk away. Yes, again, so the Buddhist might just smile because their tradition isn't one based on words or whatever. The smile knowingly, or your problem is you think too much. You'll never reach nirvana by thinking. Now, at whatever level someone silences the logos shows you their level of block. You might be brought up Christian and you ask a simple question like, what was God doing before he made the earth? No, that question is too much. Shut up. Making a hell for people like you who ask questions like that. So, now we don't keep it a mystery. One of the reasons is Pierre Grimes, who wrote the book on midwifery, explained, no time. We have the technology to destroy our species and our planet. We can't keep this a mystery anymore. The realm of being, the logos, the dialectic, the one spiritual tradition that has within it an understanding of all of them. Therefore, you can surpass even the 10 ox herding pictures of Buddhism, which is a pretty good logos. But even beyond that, a way of unifying all races, all, as we've been seeing, men and women and slaves and elderly and children, unified in a mutual understanding. Not beliefs, not picking teams. And you verify your understanding in the experience of being. That's the initiation. So it's no longer a mystery because no time. So we're just saying it now. Here it is. That's the channel. That's why the channel exists. All right. So funny and tragic that Meno liked the physical dialectic because he didn't get initiated, or he didn't separate from the body, which we discuss in the Phaedo. You can check that out on YouTube too. We read the Phaedo. For your sake and my own, in other words, it's going to be good for both of us. I'm not going to give you answers in that way. I'm not just going to give you the answers. I'm going to do something else. All right. So, can you try and use what I've given you? Can you unify it into a paradigm and talk about what virtue is as a whole? Just as we make a joke when somebody at a party breaks something and you say, hey, stop making many out of one. When they drop a you're at a pub, someone drops a glass and it shatters, everyone yells out, stop making many out of one. Which is a hilarious philosophy joke because we want to go from the many examples that we see in the physical world to a one definition. Socrates saying, let's do that here. And very, very funny. Use that joke at parties and you will be the belle of the ball. Okay. And here he drops the word paradigm. Can you figure out a paradigm from what I've given you? And Meno doesn't. He quotes a poet who happens to agree with the opinions he already has. Well, this poet says to be rejoice in beautiful and be able, which means desiring beautiful things and being able to acquire them. So, what? He failed. He didn't do it at all. All right. So, but that's the next section of the text that we're in now. Socrates does something different. Instead of just going through a dialectic, helping him understand if he's willing to follow, giving him the paradigm, he's like, okay, I'm going to pick up your definition as a starting point. Let's go from there, which is fantastic. Another way of using the dialectic is, where are you at? Like you can ask really two questions. Hey, in your life, where are you at? Or where are you stuck? Midwifery or philosophy. Where are you at? Oh, this is where I'm at. This is my idea of virtue. Okay, let's start there. And let's join the quest. Where you're at on the path of the Logos. So to be able to desire beautiful things and be able to acquire them, let's start from there. And let's build our journey from there. A different way of using a dialectic. Another division of the dialectic, if we're looking at the sections of the text through the paradigm of the dialectic, which we should be doing because he's saying, hey, use the paradigm I'm giving you. And that's where we're up to. How does Socrates use it, starting with the false maybe not false, but inadequate definition that Meno is starting with. Hey, it's better than he was before. It's a single quote at least. He's not describing women managing a household and men managing a city. He's not saying harming your enemies anymore. He's doing all right, like doing better at least. And that's what we're going to look to. How do we use the dialectic more specifically? We're getting into the specifics or the divisions. Another way of understanding definition, demonstration, and division. The division stage is the particularities. That's where usually you unfold the argument. All of the specifics. If someone doesn't already have the definition, like if they do have the definition, that's fine. Hey, you know what a scooter is? Oh yeah, I know that definition. Okay. And well, therefore, then you keep the conversation rolling. Oh no, I don't know what a scooter is. What is it? You give a demonstration, a brief example of how it functions. Oh, you know those metal things you use to ride to places and do sweet tricks and flips? Oh yeah. Now you keep going. But if they're like, no, I still don't understand. Now you go into the division. You got to break it down. Now we're breaking down the art and the skill of the dialectic. We know it's to do with virtue. We know we do it at all times. We know if we try our best to do it at all times, we're being just. We know we use it to manage ourselves well. We know we're always keeping an eye on being, whether it's an imagination that we're developing from our reading or a memory of a direct experience we've been fortunate enough to have in our meditation, in our lives, in our drug experiences, in our dreams, wherever you found it, wherever you had it, maybe it just happened through luck, providence, whether it's a memory of an experience or an imagination that you are cultivating by the text. Keep your eye on that as you reason and think and communicate with the structure of the dialectic at all times, which is managing yourself well, which is being just at all times. Now we have that in our back pocket. We have the stakes, why it's so important to learn it in detail, why to dedicate some time to it. Hey, you can spend your time mastering skateboarding, learn to do some sweet tricks. Why? Because it's fun and maybe gets your chicks, skater chicks, like Avril Lavigne. That's the reason for investing the time, the stakes, the motivation. We have the motivation and stakes for learning this art and skill of communication, a conversation, understanding, meditation, ultimately, truly, justice, excellence. We have the stakes and the motivation to learn it in more detail. From this review, that's the purpose of today's review. We're going to get more specifics. How would you use the minutia? Imagine talking to someone that you really care about and you really hope to help them learn the truth about something. How would you do it? That's what we're going to get into next time. Learning this as a true skill. The skill of all skills, or the art that informs all arts. Songwriting follows this. Writing a play, writing a novel. You're going to be doing this. The better you understand this, the better you understand your other arts, like the circle of fifths. Why is it one movement, one note as you move around the circle of fifths, changing keys in music? Well, the very first thing was, let's make one change. Beautiful things. By the way, says Socrates, desiring beautiful things. Does that make you a desire of good things? One step, beautiful to good. Okay, so not only are we learning the art that is our purpose here, as we've been talking about, our reason for being, how we escape fate and find our destiny, how we play the Dark Souls games well and be happy and not be a depressed person who's given up, how we be able to reach our goals without having to suffer the problems like Chester and Linkin Park, how we treat ourselves with rationality and maturity, discover our purpose, our destiny, how we be just at all times, how we be a walking meditation only on what's conscious and good and not unconscious and bad, how we be a true walking dialectic, which we are anyway, but to do it well, how we be just and manage ourselves at all times. These are the reasons why we're going to spend time learning the skill, which is fun anyway, and we're going to be looking at Socrates doing it, and he's a fun, clever, funny guy, and it's going to be lots of fun. So we have the stakes and reasons for going into it in greater depth. And on that cliffhanger, and on that teaser, that's what we'll be doing next time. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for the new people in chat. Thank you for joining us, Astral. And if you want to join the Discord, we have a link below where we keep the conversation going as best we can. Even if there are struggles and ups and downs, we do our best to be just, and which is nothing other than keeping our eye on the principle in being while doing the dialectic as best we can. Check out our YouTube channel. Check out the Philosophical Midwifery series to learn the same dialectic applied to finding the cause of our problems. And join on Twitch as well, or on YouTube if you want to join us live in the live streams. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you found something to be wondering about, puzzled about, applying dialectic to, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you, Astral.